At 4ZZZ, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we broadcast. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Turrbal and Jagera people. We acknowledge that their sovereignty over this land was never ceded.
And we stand in solidarity with them.
Tranzmission on 4ZZZ, amplifying the trans and gender diverse community of Meanjin, Brisbane and beyond.
Hello and welcome to Transmission on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. My name is Hazel, and in the studio with me today is also the beautiful Ez.
Hi!
And you just listen. Sorry, yeah, I'm she, her. Welcome to the show, and we have a wonderful good chunk of content ahead of you today, particularly maybe if you're a bit faith and religion inclined or maybe disinclined. We'll be asking some hard questions, I think.
Ooh, getting spiritual today. I like that.
Yeah, but before, let's stay grounded in the world of real things and let's do some news. So, to start off, we have this via The Guardian: the role of far-right manosphere in homophobic attacks on men to be investigated in Victoria. The role of far-right manosphere influences in fueling homophobic attacks where victims were lured through fake dating app accounts will be investigated by a Victorian parliamentary inquiry. It follows what Puglielli describes as a disturbing and terrifying series of attacks targeting gay and bisexual men across several states and territories since 2024. As of October 2024, 35 people have been arrested in relation to such events. Av Puglielli, the Greens equality spokesman, alleged that some perpetrators, often young men, have been groomed and radicalised by far-right manosphere influences, and the committee will be required to deliver the report as of the 1st of September.
Well, that's good. Very good. We need to get answers on this and really do something about this escalation of radicalisation of young men.
Definitely.
Also in the news is ACT passes Australian first legislation banning irreversible medical procedures for young intersex children. Australian first laws banning unnecessary and irreversible medical procedures for intersex people have passed in the ACT Legislative Assembly. The Variation in Sex Characteristics Bill 2023 will stop deferrable treatments on intersex people's sex characteristics until they are old enough to take part in the decision. Under the new laws, when an intersex child was born, their parent will be given information, advice, and psychological and peer support. Then, if treatment is to be pursued, doctors can follow plans put together by a panel of experts, including members with lived experience, or, for rare and complicated cases, individual medical treatment plans will be prepared. The ACT laws do not ban emergency medical procedures for intersex children, nor surgery that does not permanently affect a person's sex characteristics. The legislation also allows treatments if the person has the capacity to consent to them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's really, really nice to hear that. Especially because, I mean, just so many people whose lives are drastically altered by that because the hasty decision made when they were a baby was not the right one for their health in the long term.
And also the amount of intersex people that have these interventions so little and they're now never told by the parents and then they never even knew in the first place.
Yeah,
so.
And that's a loss of identity, but also potentially like a huge safety concern.
Massive, yeah.
And we have a nice bit of good news here. This is the European Parliament passes resolution that says trans women are women.
Yo!
The European Parliament agreed to a resolution that says trans women are women last Wednesday, citing the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. The Council set a list of recommendations for the EU to pursue, including, quote, emphasise the importance of full recognition of trans women as women, noting that their inclusion is essential for the effectiveness of any gender equality and anti-violence policies, call for recognition of and equal access for trans women to protection and support services. It also mentioned LGBTQ plus people in several other places, including needing, quote, comprehensive tools to monitor and counter democratic backsliding and backsliding in women's rights, and citing attacks by anti-gender and anti-rights movements that undermine democracy and target women's and LGBTIQ plus rights. The resolution was adopted in a 340 to 141 vote with 68 abstentions. While the European Parliament's recommendations aren't binding, they are expected to have significant influence on the EU's positions in the forum.
That is so good. I like the number of votes on that too.
I know, and just so declarative.
Yeah. Also, some good news. Formal complaint filed against Dr. Hilary Cass following a BBC interview on trans healthcare. A formal complaint has been lodged against British paediatrician Dr. Hilary Cass following a BBC interview about gender-affirming care. The complaint, submitted to the UK's General Medical Council by physician Dr. Helen Weberly, alleges Cass misled the public in her comments on transgender healthcare and may have breached professional standards. Cass, who led a major NHS review into youth gender services, has faced criticism from some clinicians and activists who say her statements were inaccurate and risk harming trans patients. As we know, most of those things have been debunked and they are untrue. The controversy follows a wider debate sparked by Cass's work on gender identity services and her recent media appearances discussing the risks and realities of transitioning for young people. Critics argue her claims were presented without any sufficient evidence or context, while supporters say her review aimed to reform care and improve safety. The regulator will assess the complaint as discussion over trans healthcare policy and media coverage continues across the UK.
Well, that's really nice to see some pushback.
Yes.
Especially when even our own government is looking to refer to these reports from overseas with absolutely no bearing on our population in the first place.
Yep.
It's really nice to see some people actually, standing up against that.
Yes, I agree.
And
very
to finish off, we just have a nice little event here. Well, I won't call it little. In fact, it might be the world's biggest. This is Trans Justice Meanjin's fundraiser for the world's largest trans flag. That's going to be coming up this week, 5 p.m, Thursday the 26th of February at the Cave Inn. There's going to be a number of trans artists, including Ash O'Hara, Clover Love, Lavender Threat, Emmy Hour, Asbestos, and Nicolene Martin. The flag is to be presented for Trans Day of Visibility. So if you want to be part of something big, that sounds like a great thing to go and attend.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Love it.
Peter Sterling, the only man in the world who's given birth to a child.
Someone might say, oh, you're a bit of a queer. And they'd be right.
My name is Hazel. My pronouns are she, her. And if in the studio with me today is, of course...
Ez, he, him. How you doing?
And we have a wonderful guest today. Look, if you have lived any kind of life at all, especially in a country like Australia, you probably have some relationship with religion. And today's guest is someone who can talk to us at length, at depth about this. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today, Just Sel.
Hi there, Sel, she, her.
And Sel, would you mind? I don't want to do it for you. Stating why I've called you Just Sel. Like, what are you in here for? What do you do?
Oh, well, I'm actually I'm an ordained priest in the Anglican Church. That's the old Church of England as it used to be in old money. And I keep getting called Reverend Selina. And there's nobody less reverend than me, really. So I keep telling people, just use Selina or Sel. So that's much easier.
Wonderful. So your name is Sel, and you're a reverend, but you don't like to be called Reverend Sel. I respect that. I just want to know a little bit about who you are. How would you define that if you can?
I used to define it myself as being the only licensed transgender priest in Australia, but that's made me sound a little bit too much like the only gay in the village. So I've stopped doing that as much nowadays. For a number of reasons, but yes, I'm just soon to be divorced, but 4 children, outrageous mortgage, a couple of dogs, that sort of thing, just like a normal person.
Yeah.
Well, vaguely.
Yeah, I mean, it's more about what you do with it, right? You're a normal person in those ways, but I think you're very unique in a number of other ways. So you're talking about how you are a reverend, and in some ways, like you said, a very unique one. When you're doing that work, what does that look like? What's the day-to-day of your work look like?
Well, it's, there's a lot, a number of things that are very similar to any other common garden, run-of-the-mill clergy person.
Yeah.
Baptisms, weddings, funerals, hatches, matches, and dispatches, as we sometimes call them. And visiting. But I tend to get a lot of people coming to me who they usually come to me because they've heard of me or are pointed in my direction. Particularly people, not necessarily Anglicans either. They can be of any faith or no faith. I've no real problem with either of those. But particularly where they have been told by their church leader or members of their church body that they are going to hell because they are LGBTQIA, whatever. And so I see it as one of my main roles is to actually set the record straight on that and give them some support, counsel, and let them know that actually, no, they're not, because that's not a sin. It's not separating yourself from God. It's God made you the way you are.
So that's really interesting. It's like what we expect from your role, right? Where you're consoling people, you are giving them opinions, advice, you're helping them to interpret things.
I try not to give them opinions.
Okay.
I try to give advice and I listen. It's important. Sometimes, actually, just listening to somebody is the most important thing, because quite often they haven't been listened to. And when they're allowed to speak, even if they're just speaking one-to-one and you're just actually actively listening to their words, telling their story, they quite often work things out for themselves. Right. So it would be wrong of me to actually give them my opinion, because I can only give you an opinion on me.
Right.
I can't tell you what you think. So it would be wrong of me to do so.
Right. So in a way, considering these people have headed your way after hearing some not nice words from other people in these institutions, you're kind of undoing the hearing of opinions from other religious members.
Well, that's a nice way of putting it. But yes, it's particularly opinions that actually run counter to the words that are contained in that holy text, because a lot of those opinions are human or institution-led opinions and are not actually the opinions that we see written down.
Right, and I think that's a really interesting angle to get at as well when we're talking about this, is that divide between what is of the faith, what is of the religion, and what is of the institution, what is of the individual members. I was curious, how do you go about finding that separation? Because to me, that would be a fairly blurry line to identify.
It is a blurry line. For me, the way I do it, I mean, you can call it prayer if you wish, you can call it solitude, just listening, in and breathing if you like, but just ascertaining for yourself what you believe is right. I think when we're honest with ourselves, we usually do make the right choices. I think that a lot of, and we've certainly seen it over the years, a lot of the hypocrisies that have been in place where people have, castigated other members of their society for being LGBT or whatever, and it turns out that they're actually, speaking so loudly, me think they do protest too much, sort of thing.
Right.
Because they're actually more embarrassed and scared to have found it about themselves, and sometimes it's easier to reflect it onto other people than it is to actually face their own demons. So I think that's the way I deal with it, to actually be honest with yourself and to work out what you actually believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest problems with faith, is that people in general haven't sat down and thought, what do I believe? They have an idea of where their thoughts generally head, but they haven't actually sat down and spent time with it.
Right.
And by that I don't mean sort of necessarily intellectually spending time with it, but just actually, if you like, meditating on what it is that they are thinking, what it is they are actually believing.
Yeah. Because
that's part of the secret, I think, to actually finding your path through life, through faith.
So not getting lost in all the leaves and the flowers, but more the roots it's all growing from.
Well, not only that, but not getting lost in the leaves, flowers or roots, but actually seeing the forest and the sunset that's going on in the background.
Very nice. Yeah, that's great. And what you were saying before as well about, people expressing those more bigoted opinions and castigating those who should be close to them. It makes me think of a phrase I've heard tossed around a lot lately, which is, oftentimes with these people, accusations are admissions. And it's very easy, I think, like you're saying, if you haven't had that time to reflect on yourself, if you're not seeing where those feelings are coming from, I imagine surely that can also amplify things like crazy, right? Because you know you're missing that source of that feeling, right?
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't want to belittle anything here, but in many ways that's also what we're seeing in some of the news reports that you've just had today about puberty blockers and things like that are stopping people from actually being able to see themselves who they are meant to be. Because control of, it's usually politicians who are controlling in this instance, the control that's being enforced on them, that to actually conform. It's getting very George Orwell 1984 now, isn't it? But to conform with the picture, the image that somebody else has as to how you should be, which little box you should be. You should be in a red box. You might want a green box.
Yeah, I think I would.
We want you in a red box.
Right.
We'll give you red box ideology.
Exactly, and I'm to ignore how much I like those green boxes.
Ignore green. Stop at the traffic lights. Never go.
I would think as well that linking back to what you said before about being honest with yourself, I feel like people who come to seek your counsel will probably also feel safe in your authenticity as you live, as much as your true self.
I hope so. Because otherwise I'm as guilty as everybody else of being a hypocrite, and I probably am, actually. To be honest, I mean, we all are guilty in some way, shape, or form. I'll give you absolution later on.
Okay.
Yeah, we do that as well in the Anglican Church. But I think it's it is a point that you really have to reflect that even when you're absolutely certain of something, you can still be wrong. But I think the likelihood is that when you're thinking about yourself, you're thinking honestly and deeply about yourself. Can you look in the mirror and say, I like that person that's looking back at me? Or are you looking in the mirror thinking, I like about 90% of it, but there's 10% that I'm not letting on to other people, and I'd rather keep that hidden away because that's my little secret.
Right.
And I think that's part and parcel of it as well.
And you're saying that, you can be wrong when you do that reflection, but those are steps towards.
Yeah. And there is an element, you've got to be honest with yourself when you look at that. I mean, to be, for example, for good grief, for many years, I looked at that reflection in the mirror and thought, there's somebody hiding behind that facade, that mask of masculinity. But was too scared to actually allow that person to flourish, and it took over 50 years before I actually got the courage to actually look in the mirror and say, actually, I can see who's peeking behind there now, and I'm going to let her have a look. I want to see who that person is. That's
so special, and that hits me really hard because I had a couple mirror revelations, if you will, myself. And I remember distinctly, still early high school or maybe late primary school, having a dream. I'm sure I felt wrong, but I didn't even really know why or what type of wrong it was. I don't think I could even articulate that I did feel wrong, but it was there. And I remember having a dream once where I looked in the mirror and I didn't see a version of me with long hair. I didn't see a version of me that looked a little different. I just saw me as literally a woman on the other side of the mirror. And I remember waking up from that dream feeling heavy, but also feeling like I had felt a happy feeling that I'd never had access to before. And I'm thankful to say that, now that I've been on this journey for a while, I was able to look in the mirror recently and see myself there. I didn't see a bunch of obstacles to get over. I saw a version of myself that I can start to appreciate in that way. So I really like how you've approached it from that idea of looking in the mirror there, because that reflects absolutely how it's been for me on this journey. You spoke before as well about puberty blockers and the Cass report, of course, and all that's going over in the UK at the moment. That's where you're from as well, right? how is that feeling for you at the moment?
It's distant, but it's only on our doorstep, because I think what happens in America today happens in the UK tomorrow, and we get it in Australia next week. So, I mean, we've seen that fairly recently. We saw the Trump effect taking place in America. That then got reflected through the Cass report in the United Kingdom, and then we're getting the LNP using the Cass report as ammunition in the argument about puberty blockers, even though, as was mentioned by my colleague on my right, that that it has a lot of the evidence in there was not treated correctly, was misrepresented, and all of that sort of stuff. And so, it's sorry, go on. Yeah. Sorry,
I was just trying to encapsulate. It's that importance of identifying how that is reappearing, what's staying the same between those cases. We are. Well, if you like, it's a tsunami that started in America. It spread across the Atlantic. It lost some of its strength in doing so, because tsunamis work like that. Hit the United Kingdom, and now it's come round the bottom of Cape of Good Hope. Cape Horn's in South America. Cape of Good Hope, around the Indian subcontinent, is now catching us on the shore. But it's lost a lot of its impact. But it's still there nonetheless, and it's still forceful. It's still planting those seeds.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're right. I think it's certainly true that our cultures are meshed, that there's reverberations, that those things sort of keep kicking down the line. And I think that's why it's important that we, even though it can be heavy, that we're paying attention to these things as they're changing, and that we're paying attention to the way that's going to be affecting the ones of us who are the most susceptible to it, the youngest of us, the versions of us that going through a trans experience that, as hard as it is one that a lot of us wish we could have had as well, right? Now being targeted so roughly like that. But I've kind of bookended myself into a rather sad comment here. I feel like I'm kind of getting the proper experience out of you here, Sel. You've started making me open up about myself, what I intended to make you open up about yourself.
That's a secret. That's a priest thing you wouldn't understand.
Hi, we're Worm Girls, and you're listening to Tranzmission.
That's right, you are listening to Tranzmission on 102.1 FM. This is 4ZZZ, and my name's Hazel. My pronouns are she, her.
Hello, I am Pheobe. My pronouns are she, her.
Oh my god, is that a new voice? That's an intern in here today, folks. Sorry, I've interrupted the intros. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness, it's as usual, he, him.
And of course, the wonderful...
Who else has arrived? I can't see anybody.
No.
I'm here as well. So, Sel, she, her.
I'm glad that you introduced yourself in lieu of anyone exciting or anything like that, but I'm sorry, Sal's been making those jokes, but I just realized it probably sounds really mean of me to have just said that out of nowhere.
Well, we know you well, you see, that's what it is.
Exactly. We've just had a big expose of my soul in the last session. And why don't we keep it up, Sal? Let's keep talking transness and faith. I'm excited to ask you some more questions about that. And I really want to get at this. I'm sure the listeners have had this very common experience that when they have had that understanding they are trans or gender diverse, obviously you tend to reject these religious institutions because there's reputations, there's evidence around you about how they feel about you. You're someone who found your identity and you stuck with your institution. I want to ask about how that happened. Why did you?
Well, a number of things, really. I'm not sure I'm going to put these in any chronological order or any order that you might make any sense. They're just sort of random thinking.
Yeah, as you please, go for it.
I mean, okay, I'm going to get deep and serious now, serious face on. Part of the calling to priesthood is a relationship with God, and I never felt that relationship changed. So I didn't feel that there was any need for me to reject my calling to the priesthood, which is partly sacramental, doing all that mysterious hokery-pokery type stuff.
Right.
but it's also partly pastoral, the relation to other people, and I could see that was something that was actually could be augmented. Good word, use it in Scrabble. It could be augmented and used in helping particularly the transgender but also the full LGBTI community. So I didn't reject God. I have issues, don't get me wrong, I have issues with the institutions of church, because there's not just one. I mean, I'd love it if you were all united and all actually thought the same, as long as it's what I think and not what they think. That's the problem,
I've heard they feel the same way.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? You know, we all have our own ideas. It's like football clubs or soccer clubs. I'm going to talk about, 'cause that's proper football where you kick it with your foot. You know,
I'm here for it.
Yeah, you know, you can support Manchester United, Liverpool, or if you're really sensible, Middlesbrough, which is where I come from, which is my team. And you know, you can do that, and you've all got your divisions in that you all, I think this particular player is brilliant. I think that particular player is brilliant. That move, that goal, that whatever. But there's a love of the sport in general that's there, that's coherent across the whole. You know, the whole divide, and we kind of have that in I'm going to just talk about Christianity for a second.
Sure.
In Christianity, we do have that unity in faith in God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But you'll get the Roman Catholics have their flavour of it, and the Anglicans have their flavour, and the Baptists and all the rest of them, and to an extent that you can actually, I sometimes think to myself as well actually when you look at it, you could actually say that many other of the world's great religions, Islam, Hinduism, they all have a belief in a central deity. And their take on it is very different to ours, but they've still got the fundamental belief in a central creator, loving, key word, loving, guiding being. I'll just use those words for now.
Totally.
And so, you know, in many ways, the actual, you know, whether we're supporting Bournemouth Football Club or whether we're supporting Real Madrid, those of you who are into soccer will know the relevance of those two teams, in that they are very differently levelled. But it doesn't really matter, because it's the love of football that actually unites.
Right.
And I've lost the train of thought I was going on there, but it's basically what I'm trying to say is that I didn't lose my faith in the divine.
If
it was
I can,
the institutions that I had a bit more issue with.
Of course, if I can touch on that, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are resonating with that, because I spoke to the community. I put a call out and I asked people, at least in the circles I know, to talk to me about how they feel about faith, particularly as trans people and gender diverse people. And one of the things I saw the most was that there's this idea that they still feel a faith. They still feel an idea there might be someone who created us and looked out for us, but they moved away from those institutions. And you've stayed in to sort of operate within that setting. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose it's also an element of fear in my own sense. In that moving away is taking yet another step into the unknown. Which is,
it's still a big safety thing for you. It's still a piece of who you are.
Exactly. And as I've mulled over it, I've decided that this is something that actually is my calling. It's a very specific role within a particular denomination, but I'm quite happy to straddle the boundaries of denominations as well.
Yeah, right. I think that's really interesting. I guess it's kind of just a different form of that same experience, right?
Yeah.
You've felt that pull away from being ironclad to those institutions, but you're not necessarily diving into a complete unknown territory. You're operating with the tools that you have in front of you.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I still believe in a creator God who loves everybody, whether they happen to be agnostic, atheist, Mormon, Seventh-day Adventist, whatever. God doesn't make those distinctions. We do. And we get things wrong all the time.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so you're you're happy to throw your hat in and be part of that reinterpretation.
Exactly.
Part of figuring out how that we apply these texts to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's that's part of the spirit of faith, really, of faith in a loving creator. I believe in a creator who created us for a good reason, not for bad reasons.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we are not perfect, and that's why we have so much pain and hardship and what have you.
Totally.
And I do hear, that religion is quite often used as an excuse for it. And that has been the case throughout.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. 2,000 years ago, they stuck a guy up on a cross because of what he said. So,
Absolutely.
What hope have we got now?
Yeah. So it's all these different ways that you can interpret this, and I think absolutely our audience, given the way that we feel about ourselves, the journeys we take, also believe that if something did make us, it's with kind intent. And so I want to explore that a little bit more. But as I know you've got one that's kind of been burning on your brain.
Yeah, well, mostly I'll give you some context. So like when I was a little kid and I felt very strange about my body and my identity and my image, I remember disclosing this to my dad. And my dad isn't really a particularly religious man, although every now and then he does make reference to God. And on this particular occasion, I was very upset about my image, and I was feeling really bad about how I looked. And I probably was like 10 years old. And I remember him comforting me, and he said, "God made you exactly as you are meant to be, and you are beautiful." And I think of that moment often at times, and how that still impacts me today. But it also reminds me that my body and my transness were always meant to be and always exist, and this is the journey I was meant to have. And I guess, Sal, I wanted to know your thoughts on this, especially when it relates to trans people who identify with the statement of born in the wrong body.
I've got to be honest, I don't like that statement because it implies that there's something wrong with you and who you are, in my mind anyway. You were born in the right body, it just doesn't quite conform with how you should be at the moment. It's like, I mean, I always think, I've had plenty of people question me, saying, why do you think God made a mistake in making you a man or making you think you're a woman when you're really a man? I sound like Kenny Everett. You wouldn't know who that was now. But and I say, no, God didn't make us a mistake. God made me. I mean, people are born with various medical defects. Quite regularly, cleft palates were a really disfiguring. That's the word I'm looking for. Disfiguring facial feature, but surgery nowadays they operate on children at a very young age to correct that, and nobody says, that's a sin, you should leave them with that cleft palate throughout their lives. People wear spectacles to improve their eyesight. I know I do, or hearing aids or whatever. People we all have something wrong with us in some way, shape or form, and yet medical intervention can and often does alleviate that. And we never think of that as being a sin, but certain individuals do get this idea that we are formed perfectly, which is not true. We are perfectly formed in that we are made as God wants us to be. And sometimes I think, and this is dodgy ground a little bit here, but sometimes the inner strength you need to overcome the adversities that you'll go through in life, in becoming physically who you are meant to be or how you are meant to present, I think that can be something that's quite empowering. It doesn't seem it at the time, don't get me wrong. I know it can seem very, very painful. But it is a strength, and it's like doing an exercise. You feel at first, oh my God, I've been running, my legs are dead, I can't possibly do another step. But over time, you build up strength, you build up resilience, and it's a similar thing. I think this is just me. I think that's a similar thing in how we have overcome the nature of our physical bodies to conform with what we believe to be our correct body and what God actually intends for us as well, which is the same thing, our correct body.
Right.
Yeah.
So things like you said, spectacles or cleft palate surgeries, these things. Being trans is another example of identifying that you want to be a different way to the way things are right now.
In many ways, and that, and people may even point to that and say, well, that's wrong, because you're made that way, so you shouldn't be doing it. People, 100 years ago, I can see the hand raised over there. People sound like a school teacher, don't I? George, don't do that.
It's a little sermon.
But people 100 years ago were, if you were left-handed, you were forced to write with your right hand. Your left hand would be bound until you learned how to write with your right hand. Left-handed, the original word for left-handed people they were sinister. It just means left-handed, but it's taken on that more sepulchral identity now because it was wrong, it was shunned, it was something almost blasphemous,
Right.
But nowadays, we don't worry about it. We just say, no, they're born left-handed. What's the issue? And it's similar, I think, in 100 years' time. It'll be similar. Oh, yeah, you were born. Yeah, you've got that sorted out and put right and what have you.
Yeah. I see this has also struck something with you as well, Phoebe. You've got other things burning on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to say, I feel like if you believe in a God, why wouldn't medical improvements be a part of that plan that you believe in? Like, wouldn't that be the improvements, the plan?
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, God, at the end of the day, I believe that God has, created everything. And God has created the ability of certain people to be able to correct these things, surgeons and physicians and osteo, whatever, and all that. So, we've been given that gift of knowledge, of skill, of technique, to make people's lives better, make them more whole. And I think that's, that we shouldn't say, oh, well, that bit of medicine's good, but that bit's not, which is exactly what the argument is about puberty blockers at the moment, incidentally. Yeah. Puberty blockers are prescribable if the reason for you is that you're on early onset puberty. We can use puberty blockers to hold it back.
Right.
But if the only reason you want them, and that's perfectly safe, and everyone agrees that's safe. Even Dr. Cass agrees that's safe. But if you're wanting them because you might be transgender and you just want to hold things back until you're sure or until you're old enough to make these decisions, that's wrong. No, that's bobbins. I'm sorry, that's absolute rubbish. We have been given the skills and judgment to do these things. I don't say we should abuse it. We certainly shouldn't abandon it.
I also just wanted to highlight, we got a text in that is quite, I know, how exciting, so.
I know. Be still my beating heart.
But it's very relevant to what you're saying. So thank you for texting in, Beck. Beck here says that, I thought I'd add to the chat, I was a minister for a few years and got my master's in theology and found that the longer I explored, the more mystery. When I came out as queer and genderqueer, I found myself drawn towards mystery, not certainty, and it took me away from the church. I identify now as a witch, and I find deep fulfillment in helping make space with other queer and genderqueer people to explore our internal work. And I really like what they say here. It's this idea that the mystery of the universe is such a gift of being able to make ourselves, which is exactly what you're saying there as well, right? Like,
yeah, love it.
The way we're existing, we have these tools and facilities within ourselves to find a life that suits us. And like you said, you can identify what you know inside you is doing wrong by someone else and what isn't. And by living this life, we're, I feel like, quite obviously not doing wrong by other people. It's really fascinating, and I love seeing this kind of crossover of opinion here. Oh, sorry, not opinion. But this crossover of feeling between someone who identifies as a witch. Phoebe, you said before you identify as agnostic.
Yes.
And of course,
I identify as Yorkshire.
and other scary, dangerous things like that.
Yes.
But no, it all comes together. There's, like you said before, there's all these interpretations, but there's those really strong through lines that are connecting all of those things together.
Yeah. I think Beck actually has also hit a little nugget there when she was talking about faith and certainty, because we always quite often hear people say, oh, the opposite of doubt is faith. Well, that's wrong. Faith's opposite is actually certainty. I am certain that if I take an apple and let go of it, it will hit the floor or table if the table happens to be in the way.
Right.
But I don't have to believe in that. That's faith. Certainty is the opposite of faith.
Right.
Doubt is, well, I'm not sure if it'll hit the floor. It might hit the floor unless somebody catches it.
Right.
Yeah. So I think there's a little nugget in there.
That's really nice. I really like that interpretation.
How many genders are there?
I don't know. I just got here.
Sel, you're someone who, I know you because you attended a regional queer festival called Mardi Gras, and you attended that as a panel where you could speak educationally to people who had questions that they may not have felt comfortable asking someone out and about in the wild. I know that you're now also a committee member of that event, and a lot of what you do is focused around this idea of reaching out and of talking to people. And so I wanted to ask you, obviously, when you're in that position, you encounter people who are hateful and who are bigoted. Is it worth engaging with these people?
It's worth engaging with them. It's not worth trying to convince them that you're right and they're wrong, because that would be a very bad stance to take anyway. But, you need to engage with them. If nothing else, the old phrase, know your enemy, leaps to mind. You need to know what people are seeing, what people are hearing, what people are thinking, because some of them are influencing others, and they'll be speaking to people who may not really know, and they may not be convinced, and so you've got an opportunity to put a slightly different or very different perspective on things. So yes, it's important to engage, but I think the idea that we can simply by sitting down, discussing it, come to an agreement that we are, one of us changes our mind. I remember years ago in England there was a television programme, and it had the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, whose mind is about the size of a planet, and Dr. Richard Dawkins, who's an out-and-out atheist, and the two of them were sort of engaged in conversation. I think it was BBC, just basically wanted to see which one of them would lay into the other one hardest.
Yeah. Who can earn the most points. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, whether it made good television or not is another matter. Don't yawn on microphone. Whether it made good television or not is by the by. But, the whole idea that by sitting these two people down, of very different views, sitting them down and hoping that one of them, or expecting one of them to change the other one's mind, was just ridiculous. And you're never going to do that with people. Over a gradual time, they may come to realisation that their ideas are erroneous, or they may come to an idea that they are even more right than they currently are. But it's important, I think, as I said, to actually engage with them, to hear what they're saying, because what they're saying is what other people are only just thinking.
Yeah.
And if you can actually nip it in the bud, that's the end of it.
Totally. There's those degrees of understanding that you can get. And I think you're right. There's this idea that people kind of change their own mind over time when they're prepared to, when they're ready to.
Yeah.
And that's something like clearly you can be a part of that journey, but I think you're right. It's not something that can happen just sort of through a conversation.
Yeah, I would hate to think I was an influencer.
One of those grandfluencers we had.
I was about to say that.
But it's certainly I think that's all you can have is influence. You can't actually force people to make them change their minds.
Totally. Well, I might go over to the other side of that though, right? Which is, I mentioned before, I reached out to the trans community that I know, and I asked people how they felt about religion, and one of the things I heard alongside people saying they felt still religious, they felt this pull away from the church, but they felt spiritual, I also saw some people who feel, quite emphatic, quite aggressive about religion. I might quote here, someone said, "So many people use their faith as an excuse to enforce hatred. It's disgusting." And, quote, "The church is one of the most bloodied and shameful empires the world has ever known." You hear these kinds of things as well from, obviously, people who are of your community, right? I'm interested in how do you react to those types of comments as well?
Well, actually, to be fair, I agree with them. The church is and has been, as I said earlier on, we stuck a guy on a cross just because he said love your neighbour, and never said love your neighbour unless they're transgender, in which case it's all right to hate them. He never said that, you see, so that's why they stuck him on a cross. But so the church has its hands not so much dipped in blood, but it's had a bloody good shower in it. Empires, that's how empires work. The British Empire was certainly not averse to the odd war or two. The Ottoman Empire and the Roman Empire and all that's how empires are built, through aggression and despotic power. So I would agree with the people who've said that. I think that's, as an institution, the churches, not singling anyone out here, but churches in general.
It's widespread.
Are guilty of that. I think there are some individuals who call the shots, shall we say, and they also are guilty of that. I think a lot of others are too scared to do anything else because they're scared to be ostracised themselves. It's the old, I won't say anything because I might get caught into the web with that person.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that's that. The other thing that you mentioned, though, about individuals. I certainly remember I was talking to one person once, and they said they had more difficulty going to a group meeting, a self-help group meeting here in Brisbane, just around the corner, you may know it, and confessing that they were Christian than they did of going to a group of Christians in their church and confessing they were LGBT.
Right.
Because they would expect
resistance to that.
Well, they would expect, yes, resistance, but also I think the fact that they were doing it meant that they felt comfortable enough with the people they were talking to do that. But to actually, because of this this perception people have of the church as being antagonistic to the LGBT community, which in the minute is, they were more scared about actually confessing that they were Christians than to members of that community, because they felt that actually might ostracise them from their own community. Thankfully, it didn't.
Oh, that's good.
But that was their fear, and they said that was actually a stronger fear than.
It must be so challenging to identify as both queer and then also a person of faith, because you can be rejected from both communities for having those affiliations either way.
Yeah, you're right. And I've got. That's one of the reasons I put it off for so long was that very reason. But there came a point when I said to myself, if I don't do this, i.e. transition, or begin the transition process, then there's a distinct possibility I'm going to do something slightly more serious.
Exactly. Yeah, I felt the same way.
So for my own sort of health, sanity, and all the rest of it, I actually started to transition. There was no option in that. And now I find myself, I'm in the position where, because I've done that and I'm still a person of faith, I get invited onto marvellous opportunities such as this one to talk to good people like yourselves. But also, because I can do that, because I've already gone through the stigma. I know I'll get some flack for doing it.
Right.
But at least if I'm getting the flack, they're leaving half a dozen people who aren't in the position of strength and certainty yet. They're leaving them alone. So it's like also a little bit of a barrier. If I don't do it, nobody else is going to be able to do it easily. Right.
So it's kind of like a responsibility for you in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I hate labels, but you can be lesbian, gay, bisexual, and hide it from society. As soon as you transition, that's it. It's obvious. It's in your face.
Right.
So you might as well use that as a strength than use it as a weakness.
Right, totally.
And that's how I see it. So I think, right, I've been given this. This is an opportunity. This is a God-given opportunity. All right, okay. So it would be wrong of me to turn away from that opportunity. Better that I actually stay strong and actually communicate on both to both groups.
Absolutely.
You're a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
Cell.
They call me Hurricane Cell. Cyclone Cell. That's a better bit of alliteration, isn't it?
I hear about that almost.
Cell.
Yeah.
Psychopath Cell. Yes, that's it. I'm not a psychopath, I'm a higher functioning sociopath. Go do your research.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously in that role you're communicating with internally as well, those firmer opinions. How do you engage with those people? Because they're also, your peers, the people you coordinate with as well.
I think, and in many ways, I mean, don't get me wrong, you don't go looking for a fight if you don't want it.
Of course.
So, I certainly, for example, she says, not wishing to name names or locations, but
right.
I'm not going to suddenly hop onto an aircraft and fly down to Sydney and say I want a job in the church here, because I know full well that even just as a woman, and I use the word just from their language, not from mine,
yes,
I wouldn't be accepted as a priest, because you can't be a priest in the Diocese of Sydney. They won't allow it. They think men are right and men have ruled, and it says so in the Bible. No, it doesn't. We'll just forget about that. So I'm not going to go and do that. I'm going to stay somewhere as relatively safe as the Diocese of Brisbane, because they are more progressive, more open-minded in the main. I mean, there are still some churches that aren't quite as progressive and open-minded, and you pick your friends, and
right.
you find the place to actually use as your base accordingly. You don't just say, I'm going to throw caution to the wind, I'm going to go and set up my base in that lion's den over there. No, you don't.
Of course, yeah. So it takes a bit of that care as well.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we've been talking to Sel about religion, and we've been covering a lot of themes. We've been covering communication, the heaviness of it all, the lightness of it all. I did want to come down onto one thing though, right, which is that your experience, Sel, is definitely not an isolated one. The life you're living, I'd say, is a unique one, but it's come from a position that a lot of people have found themselves in. And I was curious, if you had an opportunity to talk to a younger Sel who is still maybe not even aware of these feelings, what do you think she'd want to hear from you?
Be authentic to yourself. Don't put off till tomorrow what you should be doing today. Listen to other people, but don't follow them slavishly. I think one of my biggest regrets is that I took such a long time before I transitioned. And I had a friend many, many years ago when I was only 30. See, I'm giving my game away now. And she said, don't get to such an age that you regret not doing all the things that you could do now. And I sort of poo-pooed it, and that I do regret.
Right.
Because I should have listened to her. So, Pauline, sorry. She won't be listening because she's still in England, but there you go. But yeah, I think those things, certainly, as Robin Williams, if he could have spoken Latin correctly, would have put it, seize the day.
Yeah, I think that's really sweet. It's something that I'm glad I heard it when I did, and I think probably like most trans people, I wish I heard it earlier. It seems like maybe that might be one of the most universal feelings with trans people, is we all kind of wish for something. But I really love that we have the opportunity to live the way we do, and I love that you take your opportunity and you're turning that into a way to build others up. And I love that, like that lovely text that came in before, you're finding that space, you're preserving that mystery and that love for people within that church setting as well, which I think is really, really beautiful. We're coming up to the end of the episode, Sel. Is there anything you'd like to talk about that you're involved with? Anything you want to...
How can we reach you?
Yeah,
how can you reach me? Probably the easiest way to reach me at the moment is via your good selves here at 4ZZZ. Quick plug for the radio, folks. Or I am on Facebook, because I'm old enough to still think Facebook is cool. But I'm not really on any other form of social media.
Totally.
My email address, I'm sure they'll have it in the office here. That's probably the easiest way. But for those of you who can write it down very quickly, it's Selina, Selina 1345.McMahon, that is MCMAHON @gmail.com. There you go.
Wow.
And I am available for, if there's anybody out there who says, oh, actually, I'd love to hear her talk to our group, our community. It doesn't have to be a church one. I'm more than available. And if anybody's got a nice job they'd like to offer me, I'm more than available for that as well. So, yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for you as well, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not daft. I might be stupid, but I'm not daft.
There's a difference.
Absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, we're a community. We look out for each other, and it's these opportunities for us to lift each other up simultaneously. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things we can offer at large as trans people, but also here at 4ZZZ. We're coming up to the end of the show. If you like Tranzmission, if you want to listen to more of us, you can listen to us on demand at 4ZZZ.org.au. You can also listen to edited versions of us in podcast format on places like Spotify and all the other lovely places that you'll find your podcasts too. I think we're kind of wrapping up to the end. I also want to say that 4ZZZ is a community organisation, and if you do want to support us, you can do so monetarily if you like. It's 4ZZZ.org.au/support, and there's a number of price ranges. If you like animals, you can even subscribe your pet for just $25. My cat's been a subscriber for a number of years now, so maybe you can become as ethical as my cat and support community radio serving your community. We're going to wrap up now. It's been absolutely lovely talking to all of you beautiful people. My name is Hazel. My pronouns have been she, her, and I'm pretty sure they'll stay that way.
I am Pheobe. Thank you. I'm she, her.
I'm Ez. I've been using he, him, and I suspect that will also can carry on forward.
And I'm Sel. She, her. Not Reverend, please.
We'll keep the Reverend out of it. All right, well, thank you. You've been listening to 4ZZZ 102.1 FM.
Yeah, and whether you're starting your journey with gender or navigating the world of religion, it's always a leap of faith.
Well, to leaps of faith, this has been Tranzmission on 4ZZZ.
Thanks for listening to Tranzmission. Catch us every Monday live on 4ZZZ from 10 a.m. or listen to our podcast on the Community Radio Plus app.